Hello, my babies. Welcome to issue 57 of Titular Characters. Would you believe that this is the 57th show? God, that's crazy. It doesn't feel like we've been doing it for that long. I am your adorable host, Eva Webb, and today we're featuring Eric Palicki. Eric is a Seattle-based writer who's been making comics for more than 10 years. His work includes stories for Black Mask Studios, Marvel Comics, Derby Pop Publishing, AHOY Comics, Dark Horse, A Wave, Blue World, and more. As an editor, Eric's work has been featured in the New York Times and nominated for a Ringo Award. His new book, Blacksmith, is available now from AHOY Comics. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
A little birdie told me that you've got a really fun, super exciting project going on now with AHOY Comics.
Yeah, that's right. Blacksmith, which is a pun title, which is going to ruin everyone's chances of finding it if they Google it based on a recording. But that's okay. It's BLACK''S and then myth, 2 words. It is a fun horror noir supernatural book coming from AHOY Comics. The first issue lands on July 7th. That's the story of a werewolf private investigator who lives and works in Los Angeles and who is hired to find a very interesting stolen artifact of biblical proportions.
And what's really interesting about this particular book is, unlike most of AHOY's other books, this one's actually printed in black and white. There's no color in it at all.
Yeah, that was sort of a surprising decision. You know, we discussed it internally with AHOY, and they wanted to give this a shot to kind of just feed into the horror nature of it, and to sort of emulate that 60s and 70s creepy and eerie vibe. And at first I was a little trepidatious about it, but then I thought about another black and white horror book that happens to be about zombies that seems to have done pretty well for itself. So then I was okay with giving the black and white option a shot.
So what's it been like to work with AHOY? Tom Pyre and all those guys.
It's pretty intimidating. We recorded a panel for the San Diego at home events that'll be taking place over the summer, and it's really just intimidating to be in a room, virtual or IRL, with that much comics talent and people of that stature in the industry, both of them being decades long veterans of comics, both as editors and creators themselves. But overall, I could not be happier with the experience working with them. They are super open to ideas. This book is kind of offbeat generally, but also in terms of what AHOY generally publishes, and they have been fully on board, fully supportive, giving me the resources that I need. I've gotten to work directly with Serialized, who is their editor-at-large, and she's also a veteran of DC Comics as an editor, and that has just been a fantastic partnership. I think she made the book better by being a part of it.
What would you say makes a good collaboration in your view?
I think the secret to a good collaboration is time. My collaborator on Blacksmith, Wendell Cavalcanti, he's a Brazilian gentleman that I've known and worked with for 15 years now, and I think each progressive collaboration that we've done, we're at this point, we're pretty simpatico, and it is nice to have seen that evolution, as creators and collaborators and as friends. And, I hope it's something that I hope I get to keep working with Wendell for decades more to come. He previously did a book, Atlantis Wasn't Built for Tourists, that I wrote for Scout Comics. But I mean, our partnership started 15 years ago on a little webcomic that I was putting up on MySpace and on my website at the time. So, we have been friends and colleagues for so long. And likewise, Liana Kangas, who is providing covers for Blacksmith, she has been someone that I have known for 5 or 6 years now, and we have worked together on various projects. And so, we sort of at this point know what our individual aesthetics are, what we both bring to the table, what we're both looking for in terms of the projects that we put our name on. And, it's kind of those two ideas, whether it's, the cover artist or the interior artist, it ends up being sort of a secret sauce. And the you hope that the end result is something that everyone wants to try.
Nice. So when you write, is there a particular emotional place that you like to create from? Where do you find your zen?
Well, I often need to know when I start writing a story, I need to know two things. I need to know how the story ends, and I need to know what the main character at least, and hopefully what all of the characters want. And that's sort of builds out theme. In Blacksmith, the main character, Strummer Mercado, she wants to be left alone, but she doesn't really want to be left alone. And that kind of opens up the story for us, because it's her realization that she is looking for her people. She is looking for her tribe, for the people that are like her, for a family. And she doesn't realize that. So, and I don't know that I necessarily realized that when I started writing the book, but, as we followed her to the end of the story, she discovers that, we discover that, the reader's going to discover that. When I sit down personally to write, though, which I think is more what your question is, we live in an age of distraction where, I'm getting notifications on 3 different social media apps, getting emails and phone calls and text messages all the time. So it really is more about, I have to find that desire to write, because there are any number of excuses that I can make in a given day to not sit down and start typing. But once I do, then we kind of you just kind of find that momentum. And I always find that the last page is always easier to write than the page you wrote before it, and so on and so forth. Maybe the hardest thing to write in a comic book script is page 1, panel 1.
Yeah, I totally know how that goes. I've got this project that's been boiling in my head for like 7 years, and that's been my problem, is getting to the point where you're ready to start writing the script, Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, ideas themselves they percolate, right? It's like brewing tea or coffee. And the longer that they sit in your head, and the chance that they have to mix with the other flavors of new ideas that you're constantly bombarding your brain with, it comes, what you end up with is again, it's a secret sauce. And it's definitely, usually, hopefully, something people want to sit down and read.
So what kind of writer would you say you are? Are you the type that plans every detail of the story, or do you just start and keep going?
So there's there's a little bit of a writer's shorthand. There's planners, and then what we sometimes refer to as pantsers, because they're always writing by the seat of their pants. And I think that I'm a plantser. I think I'm right there in the middle. Like I said,
Nice.
I like to know how the story is going to end, and I need to know a few landmarks on the roadmap, so to speak. But I don't necessarily, that does not preclude, digressions from the plan, from, trying new things, and kind of just, sometimes I will just sit down and I know what page 20 is going to look like. Let's go and see how we get there. So yeah, I definitely do not make, I know a lot of writers, a lot of my colleagues will outline things to death, and that works for them, and they're obviously producing wonderful work with that method. But I do not outline first. I generally write a draft, and then if I realize after the fact that things don't quite work, I can tinker. But I'm definitely a draft first, tinker later kind of writer, rather than an outline first and then stick to it.
So the magic happens in the revision.
Yeah, in the revision and in the moment.
So where do you start with world building?
So that is, I usually start with a character, and I try to figure out, what does that character want? What is that character looking for? Or what does that character think they're looking for in the case of Strummer? And then from there you build out, or from there I build out, I should say, scenarios where what is preventing this character from getting the thing they want, or what is threatening to take away the thing that they want to keep. And that's how you really, arrive at story, is you challenge these characters in, a physical or an emotional way. And their decisions then dictate what happens. But in terms of like a broader scope of world building, it again depends on the project, and then you sort of have to adhere to that to a certain degree once you've settled in on where you are going. You don't want to box yourself in too much, but I can't have a story that starts off as horror fiction turn into a supernatural thriller with issue 4, or a cyberpunk romance with issue 4, because it'll pull the reader right out of the story. I kind of have an unofficial, because I've broken my own rule more than once, but an unofficial 5-page rule, in that I generally try to reveal at least the genre, if not at least in broad strokes, within the first 5 pages. A couple of really good examples that I always, when I talk about writing with people, that I really like is The Matrix is a really good example of how we get that 5-minute opener with Trinity and her weird physics defying run from the agents at the very start of the movie. But then we don't really go back to that for over an hour. So we have this slice of life, quote unquote, normal world that Neo is existing in. And we don't see an answer. We don't get an answer to the crazy shit we saw in the first 5 minutes for over an hour of the movie. And then another one that I said the S word, I do not know where we are in terms of your audience. So I'm sorry to any kids.
I'm actually going to ask you to swear intentionally later.
Oh.
So you're totally cool.
All right.
Do it as much as you like.
All right. Fuck yeah. So another one that I really like is The Prestige, which is a movie that is a science fiction movie, but again, you think that it's a period drama for the first half to 2/3 of the movie, except for the very first scene, and I don't know how many people remember it, but it is the field. The very first scene you see is this open field with dozens of Nikola Tesla's top hats inexplicably in the field, and then you see the pair of cats. And that is explained an hour and a half later when we get to the real revelation that this is actually a science fiction movie you've been watching all along. And I think that those are great examples of what I'm talking about, where you at least have to set up your big revelations to the reader within, like I said, the first 5 pages, so that, when you do make these big revelations and you give the explanation of what they've been seeing, that it's not completely out of left field, even though it might seem that way in the moment. They will hopefully stay with you because you have laid out these breadcrumbs all along.
Do you have a thought on how you approach diversity and representation with your work?
I am a straight, cisgendered white man, and there is no shortage of straight, cisgendered white men in comics, and there never has been. I made a pledge a couple of years ago that I wouldn't work on any project that didn't include at least one non-cisgendered person and or woman. And I want to not limit this, right? Like in the moment, what I said is I wouldn't work with any project that didn't include at least one woman and at least one person of color on the creative team. And I've been able to stick with that. In some cases, it has been, I've had to fight for that, but so far so good. In terms of the writing itself, though, I always try to consider whether there is an in-story reason for a character to be straight, white, cisgendered, and male. And if there isn't, then I try to include, I try to make my characters, or write characters that are as diverse as possible. Now, that said, I am not equipped to write about certain experiences, and I am very well aware of that. So I would never presume to write about those experiences. But I think that it's reasonable for a writer to write about shared experiences and have the characters experiencing them not necessarily be the Wonder Bread of comics characters.
So the paper versus digital divide, when you're thinking about like comicsology and similar formats, is there anything different that you have to do with one format versus another?
I personally always write my books and my stories as if they are going to be physical printed copies at some point. I know that is becoming, increasingly less likely. I have never had the privilege of working for a company like Tapas or Webtoon, where the story is being told in a digital native format, where there are considerations given to the fact that you have the so-called infinite canvas where you can scroll forever. So I always write thinking that it will be a a physical book eventually. But that said, and this is either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your opinions of the future of digital, is I'm way less likely as a writer to experiment with unusual panel shapes and designs than I might have been a decade ago, because I know that a lot of people will be reading the work on a rectangular screen and might be using Comixology's guided view, for example, that does not necessarily interface well with circular or triangular shaped panels. So I generally, keep things as rectangles now. Blacksmith is written entirely in 9 and 6 panel grids. So it will definitely read well on Comixology. However, whether you use an iPad and look at the full page, or you read it on a phone or using their guided view.
So in terms of scripts, are you very, very descriptive, or are you looser with it?
Well, it depends. Like I said, Wendell and I have been working together for 15 years on and off, and he has a very, very good understanding of English, but it is not his first language. So those things combined, the fact that he has an instinct, I think he instinctively knows what I'm looking for, and me wanting not to be overly verbose for the sake of translation, or whether he's running it through a translation or he's reading it in English. So those scripts that we work from tend to be very spare. But an artist that I'm working with who might not be as familiar with my style and with what I'm looking for, I would generally write more substantial panel descriptions.
So according to Comics Vine, you have now published 35 different books. Would you say at this point, where you are now, that writing comics is different than you initially thought it might be?
I think there is... well, for one thing, I'm not, having grown up in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and seeing Rob Liefeld in a Levi jeans commercial, I'm not nearly as famous as I expected to be at this point in my career. But I don't know. That's a very good question. And I think it is, there's always this sort of perception, and there's a lot of old guard writers who have fed into this sort of myth of the comics being sort of the Wild West, and that you can get away with anything. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. And I mean, if there's anything that's not, if there's anything that's not quite what I expected, I think that you do have to rein it in. You do have to have considerations for your collaborators. I cannot write, this is a joke that artists love to hear, is that you can't write books full of 12 panel pages of giant hands on horseback, because artists hate drawing hands and they hate drawing horses. So you definitely, there's things you can't get away with. I think, learned a lot about storytelling and the importance of collaboration. Nice. I don't have this Quentin Tarantino-esque, it's my show and we're going to do everything my way kind of attitude towards comics that I might have had when I first started. Like, artists have things they want to draw. They have their own passions. So talking to your collaborators and seeing what they want to draw, what they're interested in putting in the comics. Can we work a scene? I just turned in a script for a project I really can't and shouldn't talk about yet, but because the artist wanted to draw a motorcycle, we swapped out the character's vehicle from a car to a motorcycle. And it was, it was great. It was awesome to have the artist speak up and say, this is what I would really love to draw here. And because if they're excited about it, then it's going to translate and it's going to show up on the page. Their excitement is, hopefully at least, going to end up on the page.
So when you're going from issue to issue, how do you keep a story fresh and interesting?
So I think one of the important things is, it's something that I kind of, in my head at least, called the fractal approach to sequential storytelling and serialized storytelling, is that, a story, at least traditionally, has a beginning, a middle, and an end, 3 acts. And so you break down each component chapter in a 5 or 10 or 4 or 24 issue series the same way, so that each issue gives you, an introduction, a conflict, and a resolution, even if it's not the big capital R resolution and the capital E end of the whole series. You want the reader to have a complete experience, no matter what chapter of the story they may be reading. And so that's kind of how I approach that. Is I don't want to feel like a reader's time has been wasted if all they're doing is reading one issue at a time. There's such a move to write for the trade in presently, and I still love the experience of picking up an individual issue and waiting a month for the next chapter to find out what happens. So you definitely want to provide a resolution at the same time as you are giving your reader a reason to something to be excited about next month. Just like you want to give them something to be excited about when they turn the page. Just like you want to give them something to be excited about when they finished volume 1 of a multi-trade paperback series.
So do you have a favorite single issue story or title of all time?
A favorite single issue? So this is a difficult question for me to answer, because I
know I'm asking you to choose your babies.
Well, this is in terms of things I've read, I assume. And
yes.
So the reason it's a difficult question is because I know the answer. And in certain contexts, it is it's difficult to talk about, because in recent times, the writer has been revealed to be perhaps not the greatest person in the world. But my all-time favorite single issue is Planetary number 1.
Okay.
And it is it's a book, and the entire series is my favorite comic series of all time. And it sucks that has been sullied a little bit for me by the behaviors of certain people in the book. And I hope that that person is getting help, and is going to come back someday. But I understand if that doesn't happen, and I understand the absolutely correct responses to the reasoning, why it was newsworthy last year. But the honest answer is I still pull that book down and read it as sort of the platonic ideal of what a single issue comic should be.
Awesome. What are you reading right now?
Reading right now, I am reading almost everything I read is an indie book. As far as big 2 work goes, I look forward to the Batman Urban Legends series that DC is putting out. I think that as far as the future of the medium goes, I think what is essentially the $7.99 for 64 pages is a good value relative to what else you find on the shelves.
Sure.
And I especially enjoy my friend Matt Rosenberg is writing a grifter story. A grifter from the Wildcats and the Wildstorm universe is now in Gotham City, and he's doing a phenomenal job there. There's also
I love Matt.
Matt's wonderful. And Chip Zdarsky is also writing a really affecting Red Hood story for that book. And then there's a number of other stories that are all worth checking out. But I think what gets me about that book is I love the price point versus the page count. And, delivering more content for less money is one of the things that's going to be really important if this medium is going to continue to survive and thrive. As far as some of those indie books, Jeremy Holt just put out a wonderful book at Image. The first issue blew my mind, called Made in Korea. Radiant Black and Shadecraft are both relatively new series from Image that I'm loving right now. I'm enjoying the books that Mad Cave is putting out. So, there's just a lot of really great books coming out in the indie space right now.
I have this one friend who keeps saying emphatically that what we're seeing in the indie space right now is a new golden age of comics, a renaissance.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there was a period of time not so long ago where almost all of the books that Image was putting out was just writers from, Marvel and DC coming over and doing their own creator-owned books. And those were good books, but I like that it seems like Image in particular and some of these other even smaller companies are taking a chance on lesser known names. And I think that that's phenomenal. Books like I mentioned, and then also The Good Asian and Home and Beckstar and Nottingham at Mad Cave are great.
Nice. Yeah, Mad Cave is doing some amazing work. I love their books.
And then, of course, it's a joke, but the best indie comics publisher right now is Kickstarter.
They're doing everything, every genre, every kind of story you can imagine you can find on Kickstarter.
That's true.
So when was the last time a comic book made you cry?
I don't know that a comic has ever legitimately made me cry, but there have been a few times where I've read something that was incredibly emotionally affecting. The most recent one, obviously, I mentioned the Red Hood story that is ongoing in Batman Urban Legends right now. But the one that always comes to mind is the finale, the last couple of issues of Alias, of the Jessica Jones series, the original Brian Michael Bendis, Michael Gaydos version of that, and just the weight that was taken off of Jessica Jones's shoulders as that series ended, and subsequently again, her ability to kind of come to terms with her relationship with Luke Cage. I think that was some of the best writing that Bendis has ever done, and was just just phenomenal storytelling. But that's the one that always sticks in my mind, because that book had a few really strong emotional beats. It's also one of the first times that I was actually scared by a comic. There's a scene where Jessica wakes up and she thinks that Scott Lang is dead, sleeping next to her and being eaten by his ants. And it's just the page turn reveal of that was, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling a book that's now 15 years old, But it was just a really well done series.
Is there anyone that stands out in your mind as either the most underrated or most inspiring comics creator you can think of?
Well, see, now this is tough. I mean, this one is legitimately tough, because, I have, a lot of what I tried to do thematically, and the way that I actually pitched Blacksmith to AHOY was, at least as an allegory and as a metaphor, it is really about, it's about the life of being in comics. And, I have a number of creative friends, in this medium, and, definitely feel at home with them. And there are a lot of talents that, some of whom, deserve a wider audience. Erica Schultz. We talked about Matt Rosenberg, and Matt's doing great, but he can always stand to have more readers. Liana Kangas, who is doing the covers, and we've collaborated in a couple other respects as well. Ryan Cady, just a lot of wonderful creators that I know in the the indie comic space, and a lot of who are finally, I guess, because indie comics isn't necessarily any, it's not lesser. Indie comics should not be seen as lesser than working for the big two. It's kind of an apples and oranges comparison. But
indie comics are more fun.
Absolutely, it's just great to see some of these people, getting some opportunities. If only because I know that it's nice to make sure your bills are paid. Getting those opportunities at places like Marvel and DC.
I talked to Erica Schultz last week. She is just amazing. She is so much fun.
Yeah, she is. She's great. And I know she's currently making the podcast rounds for The Deadliest Bouquet. And I've had the privilege of reading the first couple issues, and I hope that everyone checks out that Kickstarter. But as far as like long term, a specific writer that always comes to mind as far as being underrated is Peter Milligan, who is, he's another writer from the same British invasion that gave us Garth Ennis and Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman. And, some of his work is a little bit, some of his big two work is a little questionable, but books like his recent book Happy Hour, which was excellent, from AHOY, but some of his earlier works like Enigma and Shade the Changing Man, and I am a huge fan of his run on The Human Target, which was a criminally underrated book in its day at Vertigo.
Well, Eric, we are up against the end of the show, so that means that we get to do the fun part. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. We'll start with an easy one.
Okay.
What's your favorite food?
My favorite food?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say Thai food. I don't know if I hope that's specific enough.
That'll work. Spicy food is always good.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of spicy food. Hotter the better.
Nice. So would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
I am a cat person, and I am really surprised that Jerry hasn't come over and interrupted this recording.
Right on. That's great. What's the best swear word?
Oh, it's gotta be fuck. Because it's got so many meanings. It can mean a good thing. It can mean a bad thing. It's just perfectly used as punctuation.
Punctuation. I like that.
Yes, much to my mom's chagrin, I use swear words as punctuation all the time.
I use them for emphasis, you know? What inspires you?
Oh, my friends. Other people doing cool shit inspires me all the time, whether it's in comics, whether it's, stuff outside of comics, people at my day job, uh, you know, it, it, that's generally it. People who follow their own, their own compass and end up doing the things that they love because, comics, can be thankless for really long periods of time at a go. And it's really helpful to be able to look on and see, other people making it in whatever their chosen hobby, dream, career may be.
Where do you find joy?
Making comics is the really the obvious answer.
Okay.
My girlfriend's pretty great too. But those two things mostly. A good bourbon will always put a smile on my face.
There's this big battle between the Avengers and Thanos is about to snap his fingers and destroy half of all life in the universe. Now, you get to him just in time for him to die of a heart attack, and you have the Infinity Gauntlet in your possession. So, what's the first thing you do with it?
The first thing I do with the Infinity Gauntlet is, wow, that is, I'm going to go ahead and say that I greenlit a season 2 of Terriers. But
there you go. That's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'll have time to think on some other things in the meantime. But, in the short term, we'll go with that.
Nice. So what's next for Eric Palicki?
Blacksmith #1 will be in stores on July 7th and monthly thereafter. I hope people check it out. In addition to that, right now running on Kickstarter is the second volume of our Deadbeats horror anthology, which I'm co-editing with Joe Corallo, published through A Wave Blue World. I hope people who listen might check out that Kickstarter. Murderer's Row of talent: Lila Sturgis, Ron Mars, Jody Hauser, Liana Kangas, myself, Joe, both have stories in the book, as well as a number of other established and up-and-coming creators. Don't mean to do too much of a sales pitch for that, but I do hope people will check out Deadbeats too. And then I have a couple of unannounced things that are in the pipes. One in which an artist wanted to draw a motorcycle instead of a car.
Nice.
But we have, and then from there, it's going to be, just trying to figure out what's next for me.
Well, Eric, I wanted to thank you for making the time to pop on and talk to me on my humble little podcast. Thank you.
This has been a fantastic experience. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we could finally make the timing work.
Yeah.
These were phenomenal, hard questions. It's so much better than than what you sometimes encounter. So
right on. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I will happily do it again sometime if the opportunity ever arises.
Oh my God! Yeah, just yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you back. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Eric Palicki, and I have a website at ericpalicki.com, which has a poorly upkept web store for people to catch up on my older work, and a similarly poorly upkept blog where I talk about upcoming work.
And now it's time to close the show. Imagine it. The lights beginning to come on in an empty theater. People starting to get up from their seats. The smell of popcorn crushed on the floor. And the thought runs through your head that Titular Characters is awesome, and you want to support it. Fear not, my friends, there are tons of ways to do it. You can follow Eva at EvaIsAdorable on Twitter. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Castbox, or Podcast Addict. And if you're feeling super generous, you can leave some dough at buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. There, you can contribute as little as $1. And every bit goes towards paying for production and hosting of this show. How cool is that? Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It is produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The dreamy announcer guy who reads the credits is Donnie Underwood. That's me. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. See you then!